Greetings Wargamers, today I'm going to show you how to make industrial style bases for your miniatures. With the release of Warhammer 40k 8th edition, I will be dusting off my Space Marine army and I'm looking for a basing scheme. So today we're going to be building some industrial style bases, so let's head over to the bench and get started. So to get started on your bases, what you're going to need are the bases themselves. Now the size doesn't really matter here. I'm just using some 25mm slot bases that I had lying around the office, but obviously you'll use any size for the model that you're making. Now there are several different core materials we're going to be working with today. First of all, we're going to be using plasticard. Now this plasticard is, get out the ruler and measure, 1mm thick. So we're going to be using 1mm thick plasticard, and we're going to be using that to make the metal panels and any raised details. Then we're also going to be using corrugated card to represent the corrugated steel on the bases. And the final and probably most obscure material we're going to be using today is plastic rod. Now this is 1mm plastic rod, but it does help to have a couple of different sizes so that you can use them for different sized pipes and different sized relief details. But we're just going to be using the 1mm size today because that's all I've got on hand. And to start with, what we're going to do is we're going to take our plasticard, we're going to take one of our bases and we're just going to trace around the base onto the card so that we've got the whole base width of the plasticard, if the pen will work, like so. And then just take a pair of scissors and just come in and cut the piece off. I find it easiest to just come in and cut it out as a square, like so, so that you don't have to work with as much material, and then just come in and round it off roughly. Don't get too close to the line because you want to be able to leave a little bit of overhang so that once the base is built you can cut this card right back so that it matches the profile of the base. But just cut those sections off like so and move the pieces out of the way, and then bring the base back in and you can see that it sits on top. Now what we want to do is we want to represent the different metal plates from our industrial base. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this piece in half. So just come in with a ruler, pop your base down. Doesn't need to be exactly in half. What I normally do is get an idea of where the slot and the slot base is and just roughly mark it so that it covers the base, the slot in the base. Doesn't need to be exact, but once it's marked, just come in with your ruler and then line it up, and then take a craft knife and just gently score along the top in several passes. 3 to 5 is usually enough, and then what you can do is just gently snap the plasticard and you're left with a nice flat edge. And as you can see, once we put that on the base, it'll fit over there nicely and we'll be left with a little bit of detail here that we can add more pieces to. So now what I want to do is I want to break the base in half, the plasticard in half again, so that we have a panel line going up the middle, and then we'll move on from there. So I'm just going to line this up with my cutting mat just for a rough idea of where I'm going to cut. Plasticard can be a little awkward to get to stay still because it's so flat, it does have a tendency to want to move when you apply pressure on it, so just do be careful and take your time. As you can see, I'm just gently scoring top of the card 4 or 5 times, and then come back in, apply a little bit of pressure, and it snaps, and we're left with 2 pieces. Now, there are a few different things you can do here. You can either put them on the base and leave a little gap between them. We can line that up, so you'd be left with a little gap. That works well on bases that don't have a slot, because obviously you've got the base underneath, but bases with a slot, you're left with a small gap where the slot in the base is. So what I prefer to do instead is take a piece of sandpaper. I've just got mine on a sanding block for ease. Take your piece of plastic card, and on the top side where you want the join, just run it along your sandpaper. And what that does is it creates a little chamfer, and do the same working in the opposite direction for the other piece. And then hopefully you'll be able to see this on camera, but when you put them back together, there's a little ridge there. And we'll tidy that ridge up once they're in place. If I can just get them together. I need to trim off a little bit of the excess. Yeah, where the sandpaper has sanded it away. I'm just running my knife along to get rid of the rough parts where the sandpaper is left, like so. There we are. And then hopefully you'll be able to see this, but when you put them back together, it leaves an impression which will take a wash or some paint really nicely. Now we'll clean that up once it's glued in place, but the next thing we're going to do is glue it in place. So to do this, all we're going to do is take some super glue, run it on the base and stick it down. So just take your super glue, and all we're going to do is we're just going to run some onto the base like that and over the slot to make sure it sticks nicely. And then we're going to come in with our 2 pieces of plastic card, and we're just going to pop them on. And what I find it easiest to do here is take a straight edge and then push the pieces in line with the straight edge. The glue has set up a bit, so I'm just going to break one piece off and reapply it, just so that we get a nice straight edge along the panel. So line the ruler up and then take our piece and just slide it into place, pressing down on it like that, and then taking the ruler away, and we're left with a nice straight edge. Next we're just going to tidy up that seam a little bit, and if you've got a set of small files, these are perfect for that. Just take one of your triangular files or the corner of a rectangular file and work it into that groove. I don't have any to hand, so we're just going to use a little piece of sandpaper, fold it up, we're going to place it in the groove, and we're just going to gently sand, just to bring out the definition of that line, like so, until, I don't know whether you'll be able to see that on camera, until it's nice and defined there, and then that'll pick up the paint really nicely. The next thing we do before we move on is we're just going to tidy up the edge of the base. If I flip the base over, you can see that we've got some overhang from our plastic card. So holding the base upside down, take a pair of clippers, put one side of your clipper in line with the base, and then just start clipping. And go all the way around until the plastic card is nice and flush with the base, like so. And and just clean up any sharp corners like that. Once you've done that, you'll notice that the cut has lots of little straight lines where you've come in with your clippers. So all you need to do is take your sandpaper again and just rotate the base on the sandpaper just to get rid of those sharp edges and give it a more finished look. So just do that until the plasticard is smooth, and then we can move on to the next step. For the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to add some screw holes. Now, to do this, we're going to be using a small drill and drilling out the holes, but the first thing we want to do is we want to plot where we're going to put the holes. And to do that, we're just going to get a straight edge. Now, it can either be a ruler, or if you have one, a square, and you can use the square it with the edge of the plasticard, so you know you've got a nice square, and then you can square your ruler up with that. It can be a little bit fiddly, but it's worth taking the time to get this as precise as possible, because it will give you a much finer result. So just line your ruler up like that with your square, then come in with a pen and just mark a line like so. The line doesn't need to be too bold, just as long as you can see it. Take it away, you can see, hopefully you can see it's not overexposed. See the line that we've drawn there. And all we're going to do is use something as a spacer to mark the space between the holes. What I'm going to use is just a cocktail stick. Just going to line the edge of the cocktail stick up with the edge of the base, and then come in with a pen and make a crossing line on there like that. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to see that. See over here where there's a cross. Try and move it around for you there. So we've got a cross. And then all we're going to do is come in with our small drill, line it up with that cross, and drill out a hole. Now you'll feel it go through the plasticard into the base. Once it does, stop, because you don't want to go all the way through the base. And then next, place your cocktail stick on the side of that hole and make another line and make another hole, and do that all the way along. With the holes drilled, it's time to move on to the next step. Now, on this section here that has the plasticard in it, it's the perfect place to add in either some mesh or some corrugation. On this particular one, I think we're going to add some mesh. So all you need to do is find a piece of mesh. I have an offcut here from our fence project, and all you need to do is line it up so that you've got an appropriate size, and then come in and just cut away the excess, and then do the same along the side. Just trim away that excess piece. We can use that on another base later on. Just move that out of the way. Actually, let's have a look and see if this smaller excess piece will fit. And it will, so we'll use that. And now all we're going to do is get the mesh as flat as we possibly can. And be very, very careful doing this, because the edges where you've cut can fold up and they're quite sharp, so you can dig it into your fingers. So it may be safer to use something like the handle of your clippers and just come along and try and flatten it out as best as possible. Flattening both sides. And then what you want to do is just take your super glue, pour it all over your base where it's exposed, and then take your mesh and pop it in place. Now it can be quite difficult to get the mesh to settle, If you've got some super glue activator, you can use that, but because of the way it works, it tends to leave the mesh distorted. It makes the super glue sort of glob, is the best word to describe it, and that can ruin the effect of the mesh. So what I normally do is just fold over the ends, just so it doesn't want to pull itself up, and just keep pressing down. You'll get a little bit of super glue on your fingers, so maybe wear some gloves, but I don't mind. And once it's down, just add a few more dots in a few places. Come in with a cocktail stick or something similar and just work them into the grooves so you don't distort any of that lovely detail. And then just leave that to dry, and then we'll come back and we'll trim up the edge. Now that our mesh has cured, what we're going to do is we're just going to do exactly the same as we did with the plastic card. I'm going to take a pair of clippers, flip the base upside down and trim off the mesh. You want to go slow and carefully here, because you don't want to take too much off. So just like so. And then if you flip it upside down, you can see where it's overhanging. Just come back in with your clippers and just take away that excess. If there's any left over, you can just take the flat of your clippers and just press into them, and that'll just fold them over a little bit and make it so it's safer for you to pick up, so you won't stab your fingers on the mesh. The edited footage ended up being almost an hour long, so I'm going to condense it with a voiceover to show you what I did to make the second base and finish them both off. I began the second base by again cutting a section of plastic card to cover up the slot, but this time I decided I wanted a loose panel on the base to show off pipes and wires running underneath the floor. To achieve this, I cut a rectangular section from the plastic card and then glued a second piece underneath it so that I could add in some of the 1mm plastic rod in a couple of lengths to simulate those wires and pipes. Once that was done, it was time to move on to the other side of the base. I decided to use corrugated cardboard this time, cutting a section to fit and gluing it down using super glue. After sanding all the edges smooth, I primed the base with a flat grey primer. There'll be a link to the one I used in the description below. I gave all the panels 2 coats of Citadel lead belcher. I wasn't too worried about brush strokes here, making sure to brush in the same direction so that if the brush left any marks, it would give the panels a nice brushed metal effect. For the corrugation, I began with a base coat of Vallejo burnt red, applying 2 thin coats to build up a nice strong colour. Once my base colours were laid down, I moved on to washes, starting with a wash of Agrax Earthshade for the red section, and a lime wash of black for the metal parts. After the shade had dried, I dry brushed a mix of 50 to 25 to 25% of Vallejo's burnt red, brown sand and buff respectively, to brighten that red back up. For the silver, I gave it a dry brush of Citadel Ironbreaker, followed by an edge highlight of the same colour. I finished off by painting the rim of the bases a dark grey, and as you can see, the result looks great. These techniques are really easy to do, and there are loads of ways that you can add small details to make the base stand out even more. You can see in the image that on some of my bases I've taken small lengths of that plastic rod and painted them up like spent bullet casings, and it's really easy to mix this style of base with your usual sand and stones to make even more variety. And there you have it. We've used some cheap and easy materials to make some great looking bases that'll make your army really stand out on the tabletop. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like below because it really helps us out, and make sure to share it with a friend if you know someone who could use the tips. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We release new wargaming content every Friday, and you can subscribe by clicking up here, or you can watch our latest video by clicking down here. And until next time, happy wargaming.